Thank you. The next item of business is a debate on motion 17858 in the name of Marie Todd on Care Reform Scotland Bill at stage 3. I would invite those members who would wish to speak in the debate to please press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Marie Todd to speak to and to move the motion. Up to 7 minutes, please, Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, for the opportunity to address the Chamber today on the Care Reform Scotland Bill. I want to thank the convener, members of the Health, Social Care and Sport Committee and all of the other committees for their diligent scrutiny of the bill, as well as members and their researchers who contributed and engaged with us on amendments to the bill. I'd also like to thank stakeholders across the health and social care landscape and everyone who contributed to co-design. Thousands of people with lived experience of access and care from across Scotland have given us their time and expertise to shape this legislation and wider social care reform. Your voices have inspired lasting, meaningful change. There is broad agreement that Scotland's social care system must change, and while we've taken a revised approach to this bill, our ambition for a national care service remains. This bill is now focused on making vital improvements that we all agree are essential. They'll make a real difference and provide a roadmap for the improvement of social care, social work and community health. I'm honoured to welcome members of the Care Home Relatives Scotland who join us in the gallery today. Among them are relatives of Anne Duke, who this law is named after, Anne's Law. I have been profoundly impacted by the conversations that I have had with them. The emotional harm and trauma that they and their loved ones and many others suffered from being unable to see one another for such long, isolating periods during the pandemic must be acknowledged. To make sure that this never happens again, Anne's Law will recognise family and friends as essential care supporters, key members of their loved one's care team, not just visitors. All of this started when Anne's daughter Natasha Hamilton lodged a petition with the Scottish Parliament in November 2020, calling for care home residents to be allowed a designated visitor. Her tenacity and her unwavering commitment means that Anne's Law will become law today. Further to this, the bill now ensures greater oversight on visiting decisions. People will be able to request reviews of these decisions, making sure the voices and needs of those living in care homes are truly heard. I want to thank the Care Home Relatives Scotland for their constructive engagement over many years, which has led us to this point. This week, it is Carers Week, and this year's theme is about caring about equality. Too many unpaid carers miss out on opportunities in life, and this bill will ensure that unpaid carers have a right to breaks, to support carers to have a life alongside caring. And to support this, we've added £5 million to our voluntary sector short breaks fund for 25-26, bringing it up to £13 million so that more carers can take the time off that they deserve. There's a new national Chief Social Work Advisor who will champion social work across our health and care systems and provide professional leadership at a national level. They'll be supported by the National Social Work Agency, who will spearhead the effort to promote the social work profession, strengthening collaboration and improving education and professional development. The bill includes changes to improve access to independent advocacy. The Scottish Independent Advocacy Alliance has told us that the best way forward is to incrementally increase funding year on year to make sure that services remain high quality and sustainable. And I'm really pleased to be able to announce an extra £500,000 in funding for 26-27 to increase the provision of independent advocacy services to guarantee that people are heard and involved in decisions about their care. We know that ethical procurement plays a significant role in the quality of care services, and that's why this bill gives stakeholders more flexibility when buying services. It also introduces another procurement route for the third sector, making it easier to compete for contracts. The bill will empower people to access information about their own needs and care when they need it. It also helps professionals by improving the flow of information across care settings and the compatibility of systems, removing digital barriers so that people can focus on what matters. The Care Reform Bill is just one element of our wider and ambitious programme of social care reform. Now, last month, the National Care Service Advisory Board met for the first time. It will provide independent oversight with a diverse range of voices, from unpaid carers and those accessing care to care providers and NHS and local authority leaders, including that every perspective is heard. The board will help to drive improvement and make sure that services are consistent, fair and high quality, no matter where you live in Scotland. The Advisory Board will work alongside established national programmes, including Getting It Right for Everyone, which promotes and enables person-led support right across Scotland, self-directed support, which plays a crucial role in giving people more choice and control over the care that they receive, with 22 million invested in our SGS improvement plan. Our commitment to fair work and fair pay for all care workers in Scotland, including increased pay for social workers, and our targeted programme to reduce delayed discharge. As I laid out in January, our new approach to the NCS means that local authorities and health boards will retain their existing statutory responsibilities. I look forward to working with COSLA and the NHS to drive forward the improvements that the Advisory Board suggests. Each of these programmes has improved social care services across Scotland and will be vital pillars in the National Care Service. They represent what thousands of people with lived experience have told us is needed. But we need to pass this legislation to fully realise our shared goal: to improve social care, social work and community health for the people of Scotland. I urge you to support the Care Reform Bill to make this reality, and I move the motion in my name. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I now call on Sanchez Gohani. Up to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and a declaration of interest as a practising NHS GP. We will be supporting this bill, and we're here to debate the Care Reform Scotland Bill. But let's not pretend we've arrived at this moment by design. We're here because of yet another SNP policy that promised the world and delivered a fiasco. The now defunct National Care Service Bill was once hailed as the most significant reform to health and social care since the creation of the NHS. But in reality, it was a half-baked plan dreamt up by ministers, clearly in an ivory tower, that was dead in the water before the ink had dried on the first draft. And the price, Deputy Presiding Officer? Nearly £30 million spent, all for a policy that nobody wanted, not the unions, not COSLA, not care professionals. And the care service isn't the only SNP debacle in this Parliament. The Minister said we can ask the Scottish Government questions about spending any time when speaking to Brian Whittle. So, 200 million on ferries that still aren't finished, 180 million on a deposit return scheme scrapped before launch, over £600,000 on failed Supreme Court adventures from defining a woman to IndyRef 2, and there was even 140 million on a Scotland-only census that flopped. Get out that abacus. That's approaching £1 billion of public money torched in this Parliament alone, torched on vanity projects that never delivered, all paid for by the Scottish taxpayer. And for what? Big promises, bigger budgets, zilch delivery. Now the SNP presents the Care Reform Bill, a more modest, workable approach that includes Anne's Law, which guarantees care home residents the right to see loved ones. We support this bill due to Anne's Law. In fact, we would have supported it years ago, without the eye-watering price tag of the National Care Service experiment. Deputy Presiding Officer, the SNP loves its bold commitments. They rail against Westminster one day, then send their own constituents the invoice the next. Their convictions as reliable as the Calmac ferry timetable. Their principles stirring in speeches, missing in action. At least this new bill is stripped back and serious about protecting the rights of residents and empowering carers. No grandstanding, no runaway spending, just practical reform, finally. But let's not forget how we got here. This Parliament has been a hall of shame for SNP governance. A flagship bill in ruins, 2 ferries still incomplete, a bungled census, legal stunts that never stood a chance. That's £1 billion of broken promises, missed targets and public services left in a worse state than before. Think what that money could have done for classrooms, GP surgeries or community care. So yes, we support the Care Reform Scotland Bill. Yes, we back Anne's Law, which should have been on the statute books a very long time ago. But we also say this: let this be the last car crash in SNP policy making. Enough with headlines, enough with hubris, enough with the cost. Scotland doesn't need another slick soundbite. It needs serious leadership with a plan, a purpose and a price tag that doesn't leave the public shortchanged. Deputy Presiding Officer, the SNP loves to talk about conviction, but when it comes to commitments, they cost the country a fortune and too often leave our people stranded. It's time to stop paying premiums for price streams. Scotland deserves better. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr Bahani. I now call on Jackie Bailey. Up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. A decade and a half ago, I stood here and outlined Scottish Labour's vision for a national care service. Not a quango, not more civil servants, but a coordinated national approach for locally delivered care, raising standards and ending the postcode lottery. The way we care for our most vulnerable is more important than party politics. That is why Scottish Labour committed to help the Scottish Government deliver such a service. But as I warned at the time, the devil would be in the detail. In 2021, Derek Feely published his review of social care. Having listened to people with lived experience of social care, those delivering social care and frontline workers, the review provided a blueprint for a national care service that we all supported. The SNP promised to implement Feely, but instead of steering safely into harbour, they headed straight for the rocks. The Feely review highlighted the importance of national accountability while allowing for local delivery. Instead, the SNP attempted a power grab, centralising control. It is therefore no surprise that COSLA walked away, warning that the bill could lead to significant destabilisation of services. 4 years later, 3 First Ministers later, 3 Health Secretaries later, and £31 million later, and what we have before us is a drastically reduced bill with not a national care service in sight, and not a single extra penny of that money going directly into social care. And that is, of course, the elephant in the room: the lack of funding for the social care sector. Unless social care has true parity of esteem with the NHS, then the SNP will continue to underfund services. Just look at John Swinney's raids on integrated joint boards' budgets that have left them on a financial precipice. Just this March, Audit Scotland warned that there will be a projected funding gap of £560 million next year. And the reality on the ground, while the SNP spent 4 years tinkering with this failed bill: social care transport cuts in Aberdeenshire, supported living services at risk in Glasgow, cuts to learning disability services in Edinburgh, the closure of Work Connects for people with learning disabilities in Western Berkshire. The Feely review outlined the importance of paying social care staff properly, something Scottish Labour has been calling for the past 4 years in budget after budget, but the SNP kept saying no. Fair work is a principle that we all support, but when it comes to taking any action, the SNP are last in the queue. In fact, they've cut £38 million earmarked to improve terms and conditions of social care workers at the stroke of a pen. Just think what could have been done with that money, or indeed the £31 million spent on this bill. that would have been an equivalent of 1 million hours of social care. Right now, nearly 10,000 Scots are waiting on a social care assessment or a care-at-home package, yet the bill does not pay for a single extra carer. The Feely Review based its recommendations on testimony from people with experience of social care. But rather than implement these recommendations, the SNP government set up more conversations with those with lived experience. Now, I don't demur from that, but you know, people have consultation fatigue. What they want is action. As Lorraine, a parent of a young man with special needs, said to me, the Feely report was really good. It was well received by carers. Having spent many millions on this bill, the government have chosen to ignore what would have been a huge starting point. And she ends by saying, we need action. It is in this spirit of action that Scottish Labour has worked with the government to salvage what is possible from this bill. And I commend the Minister and her officials for working with us on a series of amendments. Anne's Law, so that those in care know they will always have the right to see a loved one, righting the wrongs done to them during the pandemic. Breaks for unpaid carers, better sharing of information between health and social care, fair work, better procurement and more besides. Taken together, Presiding Officer, this will improve the social care system, but let's be clear, it's a job half done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Bailey. I now call on Mark Ruskell. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you. First and foremost, I'd like to pay tribute to the carers and care workers who've consistently looked to this Parliament to legislate for a fairer and a much more compassionate social care system. I know many of them have joined us here throughout this afternoon. I know Anne's family are here as well. And I also wish to thank the many third sector organisations, those who gave evidence throughout the different stages, and everyone who's engaged with, shaped and challenged this bill. Their contribution has been invaluable. I'd also like to recognise my colleague Gillian Mackay, who worked tirelessly throughout this process. Her engagement and amendments at stage 2, developed in close partnership with carers and supporting organisations, have been instrumental. And I'm proud to bring forward amendments that build on her work, particularly around strengthening independent advocacy. I'd also like to thank the Minister for her constructive engagement with Gillian and latterly myself. But there is no hiding the fact that this bill has been enormously challenging. The intention and ambition behind it, the original bill, does deserve recognition. It aimed to build on years of efforts to better integrate health and social care. And I think back to my time as a councillor, just the early days of that, how hard it was to bring that provision together on the ground. And reform of this scale really does require openness and collaboration, particularly when trying to fix issues that many across the sector have been raising for years. From unclear leadership to poor information sharing, fragmented funding streams, a postcode lottery for care and an overcomplicated landscape. These cracks already present were deepened by the pandemic. We know how wide the gap can be between good policy ideas and real improvements on the ground that people feel. Health and care reform has always been tough, and this bill is no exception. Integration, while necessary, remains really deeply complex. Now, my hope is that the government reflects carefully on the missteps in this process. It's not time to retreat from that ambition, but to learn how to do better next time. And it's obviously important to involve people sooner. Build consensus earlier, maintain focus on the people these reforms are meant to serve. So as we get into the stage 3 debate, I think it's important to be honest. We wish this bill had delivered more for those who rely on social care, the carers, both paid and unpaid, and the workforce. The need for improvement hasn't gone away. It remains urgent, and care reform must not be shelved. It is clear that this is a long-term goal and one that must be achieved now incrementally. The bill has moved a long way from where it started. It's not perfect, and key issues remain up for debate. But we have arrived at a place today that reflects a more consensual approach by the sector, by carers and by parliamentarians this afternoon across this chamber. Now, for many, this bill will feel like cautious progress, but progress nonetheless. It delivers some important changes. Anne's Law, centrally, huge progress. Strengthened independent advocacy, new rights for unpaid carers, steps towards fairer procurement. These are welcome and these are necessary. So, Presiding Officer, today I call on the Scottish Government to continue that work to implement the recommendations of the Feely Review. But it must do so while learning from the mistakes, engaging earlier, building wider consensus. Greater compromise will be essential, especially with local government and third sector partners in the unions. The complexity of care reform should never be a reason to give up, but it should be a real reason to lead.
Thank you, Mr Ruskell. And I now call on Alex Cole-Hamilton. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Well, thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, in my first days as leader of the Scottish Liberal Democrats, I was visited by JP Marks, who at the time was Permanent Secretary of the Scottish Civil Service, and he explained to me the very parlous funding outlook for the Scottish Government, and that all budgets, pretty much all budgets across all directorates, would be contracting, save one. And that was the increase in spending that was allocated to deliver the SNP's flagship election-winning promise of delivering a national care service. This was a promise that we had opposed from the outset, but still, nevertheless, they'd won the election, and I understood why he was apportioning that extra money. What a waste. What a waste. This week is National Carers Week, and yet here we are, marking it with a piece of legislation that falls far short of what Scotland's carers and those they care for truly deserve. It isn't what it says on the tin either. There's nothing about this which delivers needed and demonstrable reform. We may have very different visions on what reform the care sector needs, but this is none of them. Care workers are overstretched. They are undervalued. People who need care are waiting too long or going without altogether. And family carers, unpaid and unseen, are burning out because the system is simply not coping. That crisis demands attention, it demands urgency, and it demands leadership with real reform. Instead, what we've had from SNP ministers is confusion, waste, retreat, and attempts at centralisation. Let's not forget, this bill began life as a national care service, a bureaucratic power grab to hoard control of social care in Edinburgh rather than empowering those closest to the people who need it. Scottish Liberal Democrats were the only party to oppose that flawed idea from the very first. And we did so, and we did more than just oppose. In budget negotiations this year, we took action to ensure that it was excised from the pages of this legislation finally. We made it clear we would not support any budget that contained a single penny on national care service spending, and we won. But sadly, not before the SNP had squandered £30 million worth of that money earmarked and identified to me by JP Marks all those years ago. Money that could have paid the salaries for 1,200 care workers for an entire year. In those budget negotiations, we secured millions more for frontline social care and fashioned new training pipelines for care workers through Scotland's colleges. Scottish Liberal Democrats have a proud record when it comes to this area. We introduced free personal care for the elderly. We enshrined the right to carers' leave in employment law, and we've just secured a change to let family carers earn more without losing the support they depend on. My colleague at Westminster, Sir Ed Davey, has made care a cornerstone of our manifesto and spoken bravely about his own experiences as a carer. I'm sure many members will be familiar with his story. We also want to see a UK-wide care wage, £2, at least £2 above the minimum wage, and to remove the national insurance hike on care providers. That's the kind of vision for care that the sector and Scotland needs. That's what carers deserve, and it's what my party, the Scottish Liberal Democrats, will keep fighting for. Presiding Officer, my party are prepared to support the bill before us today, but in so doing, let me be clear, this is not the transformational change of our care sector that we need to abate the crisis. We will support it because of the positive changes it makes in recognising carers' rights to breaks, in strengthening advocacy, ensuring loved ones can stay connected to people in homes through Anne's Law, and I pay my personal tribute to her family with us today. It also improves information sharing, offers better procurement routes for the third sector. These are useful steps, but they're no substitute for the real reform our sector desperately needs. We're also glad that the bill finally no longer contains the most damaging parts of the original plan, which would have centralised decision-making away from those communities who understand how best to deliver care, particularly in remote and rural communities, and instead placed it in the hands of ministers. But we must not let this bill pass without a reckoning. The SNP government should apologise to care users, to care providers, and to Scotland's incredible care workforce. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Cole-Hamilton. Excuse me. We will now move to the open debate. I call Claire Hockey to be followed by Michael Mara. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I put on record my entry in the Members' Register of Interest. I'm employed as a bank nurse by NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde. And earlier this year, I underlined my commitment as convener of the Health, Social Care and Sport Committee to ensuring that substantial further scrutiny of the bill before us today would take place. And I'd like to express my thanks to all those who have contributed to that process and to all stakeholders, members of the public and the Parliament who have shared their views before today. We know that the social care system in Scotland needs to change. Partners across the public sector, including across local government and our National Health Service, agree. And we've also heard repeatedly from people with lived experience that the current adult social care system must change to drive up standards in a consistent manner and ensure access to high-quality social care across Scotland whenever it's needed. Presiding Officer, the status quo is not an option. Change must be sustainable, our social care workforce must be allowed to flourish, and the sector must be future-proofed. The Scottish Government has a long-standing commitment to the principles of fair work for the social care sector, underlined by a total investment of £950 million to improve pay. And this commitment sits alongside a clear focus on both local and national workforce planning, leadership and learning and development support for the sector. And irrespective of this bill, the Scottish Government has been committed to taking immediate action to improve outcomes for people accessing care and support. Throughout the bill's progress, the Government was committed to listening and engaging, revisiting its approach to further engage with people who have lived experience, COSLA and the NHS, amongst others. And the new non-statutory advisory board is allowing vital reform to be driven forward at pace, bringing together key partners. And we're already seeing progress across Scotland in reducing delayed discharges, thanks to a focus on supporting the local areas who are experiencing the most challenges. Presiding Officer, the changes that are before us today will improve the lives of those who have been calling for reform. People have told us about their frustration and trauma when they had to share their stories repeatedly. And that's why a key component of the bill is enhanced information sharing to improve coordination, ensuring consistent information standards and laying the foundations for integrated digital approaches, which will make it easier for people to access and manage information about their own care. The bill recognises the incredible contribution made by unpaid carers in our community, introducing a right to breaks to support people to protect their well-being and sustain caring relationships. And this year's budget provided £13 million for voluntary sector short breaks, an uplift of £5 million. And a working group has been established to bring together carers and third and statutory sector representatives, making sure their voices are central to ongoing discussions about this matter. And of course, the implementation of Anne's Law will give adult care home residents a legal right to see their loved ones, giving formal recognition to the role of their family and friends in providing care and support and companionship. It is formal recognition that family and friends are not simply visitors. They are integral and essential part of the care team for their loved ones. The core elements of Anne's Law are already in place through guidance and strengthened health and social care standards on visiting for care homes, but the Government are committed to enshrining this in legislation. Ultimately, all of us in this chamber, Presiding Officer, share a common goal. We all want everyone to have access to consistently high-quality social care support across Scotland, whenever and wherever they might need it. And we want our social care workforce to flourish. It's also a goal shared by the social care sector, the public, families and loved ones, and most importantly, those whose lives and well-being depend on us getting it right with this. So let's get on with it.
Thank you, Ms Hockey. And I now call Michael Mara. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The saga of what we are now calling the Care Reform Bill is a microcosm of this SNP government. It starts with vainglorious press release or the applause line for the leader's speech, light on detail, certainly, but quickly unable to marshal any detail at all. Absent leadership, political incompetence leading to financial chaos, all resulting in messy, watered-down laws which achieve none of the lofty ambitions declaimed at the outset. Then move on, hope nobody notices, rinse and repeat year after year. This legislation will not lead to a single extra carer being employed. It will do absolutely nothing to ease delayed discharge, and there is absolutely nothing in it to fix the crisis in social care in Scotland, despite the expenditure of tens of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money and untold public resources being applied. From start to finish, this bill has been a total calamity, as with a succession of ministers unable to answer basic questions about the legislation they are meant to be steering. On 8th of November 2022, then Minister responsible Kevin Stewart was aghast at COSLA's estimate that the bill would cost over £1.5 billion. Defiantly, he stated to Parliamentary Committee, COSLA made assumptions that we do not recognise. But lo and behold, little over a year later, on 23rd of January 2024, Scottish Government officials told the Finance Committee of Parliament that the cost of the bill Mr Stewart was talking about would have been £3.9 billion. A truly astronomical figure, more than double the figure the Minister did not recognise, equal to the entire annual transport budget. Critically, there is absolutely no way that the country could have afforded it. Of course, by that point, the legislation had rightly and mercifully been blown entirely off the SNP's course towards bankruptcy. One of the principal reasons for that was the Parliament's Finance Committee had rejected the financial memorandum as utterly incoherent and entirely incompetent. Minister Marie Todd and her officials returned to Finance Committee just a fortnight ago with updated financial information on the unrecognisable legislation which we are debating today. Or rather, the Minister came with some of the information. The public are left cross-referencing the most recent document with the original financial memorandum from 2022 and the updated version from 2023. Three large financial documents with different timescales, some sections measuring costs across 5 years, some across 7 years, some across 10 years, comparing not just apples with oranges, but with broccoli and spuds as well. And at the last moment, the committee received an update. There was an error in the updated financial information received. Utterly shambolic. Deciphering the true cost of this bill has been compared to assembling a jigsaw in the dark, which frankly I think is an unfair comparison. In this case, we are assembling perhaps 5 different jigsaws. The pieces are all different sizes, and the people who have made them aren't even sure they gave us all the pieces in the first place. From start to finish, there had been a total lack of transparency, myriad documents littered with errors, making it absolutely clear that neither civil servants, but particularly ministers, had the first clue what they were doing. This chaos, incompetence and direct negligence has come to typify every significant piece of legislation that has passed through Parliament in this term. The National Care Service Bill, the Circular Economy Bill, the Children Care and Justice Bill, the Police Ethics, Conduct and Scrutiny Bill. No wonder Scotland's budget is in such a mess and the SNP's legislative agenda for this session is in tatters. Ultimately, the legislation will pass this evening. We'll see some very modest gains wrung out of the process by stakeholders, and I'm glad that some of them are with us tonight. Scottish Labour amendments have strengthened Anne's Law, giving care home residents right to visits and the right to breaks for carers. It did not need a process this long and at this expense to the Scottish taxpayer to do it. But this will not deliver the lasting and positive legacy of a high-quality care that is fit for the future that Nicola Sturgeon promised back in 2020. Landmark legislation that, with her anti-Midas touch, turned to mud. Next year, Presiding Officer, Scots can call time on the incompetence, chaos and failure of the SNP, joining with the people of Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse by electing a Scottish Labour government that will set a new direction for Scotland and get our health and social care system back on its feet.
Thank you, Mr Mara. We now move to closing speeches. I call on Mark Ruskell to close on behalf of the Scottish Greens. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. And as we conclude the final stage of this bill, what matters most now is what happens next. How this legislation is implemented, how it delivers for the people it is meant to serve, and how we respond to the many challenges that still remain. The bill, for all its difficulty, has laid the groundwork for progress. It's not the transformation that many had hoped for, but it is a step towards a more equitable and a more consistent care system in Scotland. It introduces important changes that will make a real difference to people's lives. And I don't want to lose sight of that. Many members have spoken very movingly about Anne's Law. I'd like to pay tribute to her family. And I think back to the confusion, the desperation of our constituents during the COVID crisis. I think this is a really important piece of progress that we've made here today. And of course, the improved rights for unpaid carers, the strengthening of independent advocacy, these are not small things. They shouldn't be overlooked. They are important changes that this Parliament has made here tonight. They are, of course, a product of that advocacy, that campaigning, that hard work across the sector in this Parliament and beyond, and they are wins that we must recognise. But of course, our job is not to sit on our laurels. We need to not stop here. We need to continue and deliver progress. And those cracks in our social care system remain, and they've been made deeper because of the years of underinvestment. We still face the same core issues: workforce pressures, fragmented structures, unclear lines of accountability, and a system that too often leaves people navigating the complexity when they're at their most vulnerable. The ambition to bring more of the care sector into public hands should not be dropped. It should be pursued strategically, incrementally, recognising the financial and logistical challenges while staying true to the long-term goal. And I hope that's something that in this Parliament that we can agree to. The Labour Party will not drop and will work towards more of a publicly delivered care service, because public care should continue to be seen as a necessary investment in the dignity and well-being of our communities. If this Parliament is serious about the issue, we must treat this bill as the first step, as a foundation. That means committing to the ongoing dialogue with local authorities, the workforce, with people receiving care. It means funding the changes we legislate for, and it means being honest when things don't go to plan and being open to doing things differently. I also wish to acknowledge the constructive spirit in which opposition and government have worked together between Stage 2 and Stage 3 of this bill, which has undoubtedly made the bill stronger this evening. So, Presiding Officer, the complexity of care reform is not an excuse to walk away from it. It's the very reason we must rise to challenge. We can't lose sight of those at the heart of these reforms, because they are counting on us, and they will continue to count on us to get this right.
Thank you, Mr Ruskell. I now call on Carol Mochan to close on behalf of Scottish Labour. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. When I joined the Parliament back in 2021, following the Feely review, there was a genuine enthusiasm about the prospect of a national care service. Only 4 years later, that enthusiasm has depleted. The reality is we have a much reduced bill, once heralded by the Government as biggest public sector reform of a generation, is now a limited number of Stage 3 amendments. The bill does not address the fundamental problems in social care, and the Government seem to be unable to tell us how they will address these issues. I think that is a great shame. It was our duty to build enthusiasm and support for what we could have been such real, far-reaching legislation. But let's be clear today, as we have heard, it is a missed opportunity to be transformative, and that is largely due to government inability and lack of vision. Though it is not the legislation I or many wanted, what is important now is that we make it as robust as possible and take on board the concerns many of my colleagues, the trade unions and professional organisations have raised throughout this process. And of course, a great thank you to all our constituents, people like the Care Home Relatives Group and many more who have truly influenced the bill and worked with us. They have contacted us, and it is our responsibility to make sure this progresses. Scottish Labour's vision was a bill which really addressed the long-term needs of social care, putting it on a footing with our NHS and having a system fit for the future for both staff and users. Throughout the stages of the bill, we have sought to ensure the legislation would address commissioning and fair work which is essential to ensure improvement in social care, both of which we have brought back at Stage 3, and we are pleased that our amendments have been successful. We would have wished for more, much more. However, it was clear by Stage 3 the Government had no ability or vision to deliver. And so we do want to ensure we see Anne's Law, rights to breaks, improved commissioning and digital care records in place as quickly as possible. And that is why we will, of course, support the bill this evening. But there is much work to be done. I have to trust that this bill will achieve what the Minister believes it will and fulfil the potential for change within it, because the care sector in Scotland can no longer wait for serious reform. They need action now. As we've heard from our colleague Jackie Bailey, 10,000 Scots waiting for care or care assessments. As we've heard from Michael Mara, he reminded us about the financial incompetence of this government, and our constituents need this to be delivered. They are the ones who will suffer in the long run. Scottish Labour will work together with the Government to build on any potential. And of course, as I've said, as such, we will be supporting the bill this evening. But make no mistake, Scottish Labour in power will deliver a national care service worthy of the name, and that is what we look forward to. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Morgan. Excuse me. And I call Brian Whittle to close on behalf of the Scottish Conservatives. Up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. We often say it's a privilege to do the job that we do. Even after nearly 10 years of walking into this place, I'm still a bit in awe of this is the place that I work, and I remind myself every day of why I came here. And I think it would be similar, I would imagine, to most of us in here, because we have a passion about our country and we want to have the privilege of making a difference to the people that we serve. There are many good people across this chamber. Some I agree with, some I do not. But all elected members of whatever persuasion have my respect for taking the step to stick their head above the parapet. Nonetheless, Deputy Presiding Officer, I believe there are those who have allowed political objectives to overtake the fundamentals of what we are meant to be doing here. When we make law, it should be our overriding objective to make the very best law possible for our constituents and for the country. This bill is a prime example of how not to do legislation. A bill that began as the National Care Service Scotland Bill has been hollowed out after years, and millions of pounds were wasted by the Scottish Government on a fundamentally flawed plan. Now that husk has been reshaped as the Care Reform Scotland Bill, a grab bag of random policies that have been sitting in the Scottish Government's social care filing cabinet gathering dust. There are policies contained within this bill that, of course, we support, Deputy Presiding Officer. Anne's Law is long overdue, as is giving unpaid carers the right to breaks. But there is a serious question about why the SNP have waited until now to deliver these pledges that have been so desperately needed for so long. Scotland's social care system desperately needs reform. On that we all agree, but this bill is not going to deliver the level of reform that is needed to secure the future of social care in Scotland. A more accurate title for this bill would be Care Reform Tinkering Around the Edges Scotland Bill. Far too many of the proposals in this bill fall far short of the category of we must do something about social care. I found something, so let's do that. There doesn't seem to be a clear aim in mind. Many of the initial sections as initially proposed were vague to the point of abstraction, and as I've already said, there doesn't appear to be any overriding objectives for these changes. We will support the bill today, Deputy Presiding Officer, not because we believe it is the best solution available, or even if all aspects will deliver progress, because amongst this disastrous strewn bill are a few changes which have the potential to deliver meaningful change. Carers' breaks, as I've mentioned, Anne's Law. Digital patient records was raised, although I recognise that the Minister and the Government don't seem to understand the words agnostic, technical interoperability, and therefore vote against an amendment. Of course, that is still dependent on the Scottish Government following through effectively on their commitments. But as members know, I am, of course, one of life's great optimists. Presiding Officer, the Minister called me cynical for daring to suggest that we measure the outcomes of the bill and that we should know the outlying costs of the bill. The reality is, I believe that most members engaged in developing and amending this bill in an honest way to deliver the very best for Anne's Law, the very best for carer respite. To suggest that I was cynically trying to delay the implementation of the bill, to delay the introduction of Anne's Law, to delay carer respite, I find quite disrespectful and disingenuous. The cynicism lies at the feet of the Minister and the Scottish Government. They cynically once again deliver a bill they don't want to be measured against the outcomes or how much it will cost. Quite frankly, I think it's cynical of the Minister to make everyone wait for this legislation rather than bring it forward items via regulation. This is politics at its very worst. Social care is in crisis. 4 years later, £31 million later, the SNP are desperately trying to claim a victory. And I say to the Scottish Government, you've forgotten why you're here. This place is not about trying to save political face. It's about delivering the very best for Scotland. Presiding Officer, once again, they have fallen far short of what could and should have been achieved. Deputy Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Whittle. I now call on Marie Todd, Minister, to wind up the debate. Up to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In 2021, following publication of the Feely Review, This government made a clear commitment to reform Scotland's social care system. And over the past 4 years, my predecessors and I have spoken to hundreds of people who use care services, their families and those who deliver care. And each of these conversations has left a profound and lasting impression. Today we have an opportunity to reflect these voices in our decisions by passing legislation that will make a real and lasting difference. Now, as we've heard today, the Conservatives and the Lib Dems have always opposed the creation of a national care service. From the very beginning, they were against it. The Labour Party claimed to support a national care service. In fact, apparently it was Jackie Bailey's idea long before Feely, but there has never been clarity on what that would look like. Everyone in this chamber knows that the status quo is not an option, that social care must improve, and this government is unwavering in our commitment to create a national care service that meets the needs of the people of Scotland. I agree with Mark Ruskell that now is not the time to dampen our ambition. And as I laid out in my opening speech, we'll drive enhanced oversight and support of the care system through the National Care Service Advisory Board to provide a level of independent oversight that's been missing for too long. But to unlock the full potential of the National Care Service, we must pass these vital changes that the Care Reform Scotland brings. The groundbreaking change that Anne's Law makes, I would really like to make some progress. We've all had a chance to have our say. The bill brings forward the groundbreaking change that Anne's Law makes to ensure that family and friends of people in care homes are not simply seen as visitors, but as an essential part of the care team. The bill contains a legal presumption that suspending visiting is likely to cause serious harm to their loved one's health and well-being. It contains a new right to breaks for unpaid carers to protect their health and well-being by giving them the rest that they need. There's expanded access to independent advocacy for our most vulnerable citizens to ensure that their voices are heard in decisions about their care. We're improving the flow of information across care settings so that people don't have to share their stories multiple times. The bill also establishes a National Chief Social Work Advisor role to provide professional leadership and champion the sector. They'll lead a new National Social Work Agency which will advance and advocate for the profession. And there will be new powers to improve social care procurement, including a new route for the third sector. Now, we know that we must improve the system for lasting progress to be made across Scotland. And to do that, it is vital that our hard-working and dedicated workforce feel engaged and supported and valued for their important work. We're working hard to introduce voluntary sectoral bargaining for the care sector through the Fair Work and Social Care Group. We continue to drive that work forward whilst we wait for the UK Government legislation to extend devolved powers. And in the meantime, we're supporting the sector with funding to deliver the real living wage. I think the bill for that is £950 million this year, so that care workers are paid what they deserve. Despite an incredibly challenging financial situation, the Scottish Government has prioritised investment in social care, including almost £2.2 billion investment in social care and integration, exceeding our commitment to increase funding by 25% over this Parliament, by over £350 million, over £88 million a year in local carer support through Council Carers Act funding, £13 million a year for voluntary sector short breaks, a further £13.4 million to support growth in the Independent Living Fund, and £5.9 million of additional investment into the Care Inspectorate. But despite our increased investment, we know that the social care sector is currently dealing with a heavy and an entirely avoidable financial pressure, thanks to the Labour UK Government's decision to increase employer national insurance contributions and to lower the threshold at which employers start to pay them. This short-sighted and reckless decision is estimated to cost the adult social care sector in Scotland alone more than £84 million. I have heard loudly and clearly from the sector that the UK Government must fully fund the cost of the national insurance hike to alleviate the pressure the sector is under, and I echo those calls, and the Scottish Government will continue to apply pressure. Now, I have listened to this debate in the Chamber today, and I understand the strong feelings that many of you hold. We have worked tirelessly to balance the concerns raised in this chamber with the urgent needs of the people in Scotland. This legislation reflects our shared commitment to strengthening social care, social work and community health. People who are accessing social care, their families and everyone who supports them can't wait any longer for the changes they urgently need. This shared commitment is no better embodied than by Anne's Law. For almost 2 years at the end of her life, Anne Duke was denied the companionship and the touch of the people that she loved. As her husband Campbell wrote, "At your time of greatest need, they robbed you of the one thing that you needed most, the unconditional love of your family and friends." This bill will make sure that no one else will suffer the trauma and harm that was experienced by Anne, by her loved ones and by so many families across the country during lockdown ever again. I urge you to support the bill.
Well done.
Thank you. That concludes the debate on Care Reform Scotland Bill at Stage 3. It's now time to move on to the next item of business. And I'm minded to accept a motion without notice under Rule 11.2.4 of Standing Orders that decision time be brought forward to now, and I invite the Minister for Parliamentary Business to move the motion.
Move, Presiding Officer.
The question is that decision time be brought forward to now. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed. There's one question to be put. Point of order, Gordon MacDonald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Under 12.1 of the Parliament Standing Orders regarding conveners of committees, Rule 1.12 states, where the convener is not available for any meeting of the committee or leaves the chair for any part of the meeting, that meeting or that part of the meeting shall be chaired by the deputy convener. The Standing Orders also go on to state under 12.3 regarding committee meetings that a committee shall meet in Scotland at such places as it may decide with the approval of the Parliamentary Bureau and the convener's group. Can the Presiding Officer therefore first clarify whether it is proper practice for a convener to chair a committee remotely online, or whether this duty should be passed to the deputy convener in their place? And further, given the articles in the news last week that Douglas Ross will be in Turks and Caicos tomorrow, when he is due to convene the Education Committee meeting, where it will be at 3 a.m, can she confirm that this is acceptable?
Thank you, Mr MacDonald. The Parliament's Standing Orders make no distinction between virtual or in-person attendance at committee meetings, as with the Chamber, and it is the role of the convener to chair the committee if they are present, whether that is in person or virtually. There is one question to be put as a result of today's business, and the question is that motion 17858 in the name of Marie Todd on Care Reform Scotland Bill at Stage 3 be agreed. And as this is a motion to pass the bill, the question must be decided by division. There will be a short suspension to allow members to access the digital voting system. Just a reminder that today's PIN is 8680.